Welcome to the Private Practice Pro podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping therapists cultivate success. Here's your host, Kelley Stevens.
This podcast is sponsored by Simple Practice. I've been using Simple Practice since 2016, which has helped me run a smooth and profitable private practice over the years. It has simplified everything from scheduling to billing, giving me a better balance between the work I'm so passionate about and the family time I'm not willing to miss out on. Check out the episode notes to get a free 2-month trial of Simple Practice, my preferred all-in-one HIPAA-compliant solution.
Welcome back to everybody to the Private Practice Pro podcast. I'm so excited to have Linzy here. Linzy, I have felt like that you've been on my podcast before, but we were reminiscing that I've been on your podcast before. And then we also WhatsApp and we talk.
Yes.
So in my mind,
Yes.
You've been on the podcast, but I guess you haven't, which seems so weird to me because I talk to you all the time.
It's like I've been on the podcast, but actually I have not. I'm very happy to be
exactly.
here. Thank you, Kelley.
So I'm so happy to it. I was laughing because I feel like whenever we talk, we get into it. Like we talk a long time. So we won't do that today. Don't worry, anyone who's listening. We won't go on for 3 hours.
We got boundaries, yeah.
We'll have some good boundaries. And we're going to talk about group practice. But Linzy, can you introduce yourself? Tell us where in the world you're sitting, and then kind of just give us an overview of your ecosystem, because there's a lot of things.
Yes. So my name is Linzy Bonham. I am a therapist turned money coach. I am based in Guelph, Ontario, Canada. But I largely work with Americans because there's a lot of you folks. So I serve therapists and health practitioners in the United States and Canada, and sometimes a bit in Europe too. And my ecosystem is that I have the Money Skills for Therapists podcast. I have
one of my
Money
favorite.
Skills for Therapists, my signature course, which is my foundational course for folks in solo practice. And then I have Money Skills for Group Practice Owners. You're going to get the theme. I think folks are picking up the theme for people who are running group practices and employing other clinicians or practitioners. So that's my little ecosystem that I've built. It's not super little. It's not super big, but it's big enough.
It's not little. It's definitely not little.
Yeah.
And I mean, I got to definitely shout out to your podcast. I love your podcast.
Thank you.
And I've had so much fun being on your podcast. And we'll make sure so anyone has all the info. We'll link to all of your things in the show notes so people will have it. But today, without further ado, the reason I wanted you to come on is I wanted to talk about group practice, because group practice is way outside of my zone. It's not something I usually talk about, but it's an area where I see so many therapists just making some pretty big mistakes that impact, their employees' lives and their own personal finances. So we thought maybe today we would talk through some of the big mistakes that we see group practice owners make, maybe some of the ways they can work around them a little bit, and kind of go from there. So
Great.
Do you have one?
Okay.
I mean, I got tons, but do you see any ones, common ones that you see people make in your experience?
So the first one that rises up for me is setting fee splits from their heart, or from comparing to a neighbor rather than actually looking at their numbers, right? So the folks that I work with, in Money Skills for Group Practice Owners, I always really make sure that I'm calling in folks who actually want to be group practice owners, right? So there's lots of folks who go into group practice because they see it as easy extra money. That's the story. It's not, by the way. If you're listening and you think, oh, I have more clients than I can handle, I'll just hire some more people. That'll be easy. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. So the folks that I call into my course with the messaging is they are people who want to be group practice leaders, right? Who love mentoring, who love serving their niche and helping other clinicians and practitioners serve the folks that they love to serve in a way that's very aligned. And those folks who tend to be more values aligned tend to lead from their hearts instead of leading from their heads. And what that can mean is they really want to make sure that they're good employers. They don't want to exploit people. Maybe they've had experiences of feeling exploited and they're I don't want this to be the group practice or the agency that I worked at. And therefore, I'm going to set these really generous splits. But what happens is people set splits, not even splits, just wages. They just end up paying their employees so much that the practice is unsustainable, right? In trying to be kind And in trying to take good care of people, they actually build something that cannot last, right? That is like basically the machine is broken, and then that's going to come out in your practice in all sorts of other ways.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and this is one of those questions that I feel like I get all the time for people, which is funny, like this generic question of like, what's a fair split? And then somebody will give me a number, 70-30, 50-50, whatever. And an Instagram question, and it's like, well, I cannot answer this question without knowing you and your business and any of it. So backing up a little bit, my question for you, Linzy, is, and we didn't prep these questions, so anyone who's listening, we're talking through this together. But the split system as a whole, what do you think about, like, I don't know, like, I don't necessarily have the right answer, but I see so much stickiness with this idea that, like, we're dividing people's time 70-30 or whatever. So what do you kind of think about it in general?
Yeah, so what I have observed, and I will say I have not run a group practice, right? Like, I am teaching this material to therapists completely from the place of like somebody who knows how to balance leadership and emotional intelligence and numbers. Right. So that's what I'm teaching folks in my course. So I don't have a prescriptive answer of like, this is the right way. This is the timesheet system you need to use. None of that. Like, what I'm teaching folks is like how to think like financial leaders, how to have the skills. And what I have observed in working with group practice owners is the split system is just kind of like rife with complexity and opens up a lot of room for conflict. Because in the way that you're setting up your wage for your employee, you're emphasizing the fee that's coming in, and you're emphasizing like what's going to the practice. And you're really making it look like this very clear, like this is for you and this is for me, right? Right. What I do see work much better, and where you can actually start to think about what is fair and what is ethical, is a wage. What is a livable wage for the person you're looking for? Not even livable. What's a good wage? Right? Like, if they work X amount of hours that makes sense for the kind of clients that you see, which is going to look different, what an appropriate amount of clinical hours is different if you're doing complex trauma and dissociation work rather than like, you know, motivational interview or CBT. Those are very different types of services to be offering. But like, for your clinicians to be earning a good living, what is the wage that fits with the amount of hours that you're going to ask them to work, an ethical amount of hours? And that starts to get into something that could actually be seen as ethical or fair, right? That's what we're actually talking about, is like creating like financial living conditions for folks.
Yeah. And I mean, I think this is one of the reasons why I really wanted you to have you on. And because I think coming from that values place, and also like, I feel like anytime you and I have a conversation, you're so good at thinking about how does your money align with your values? And then how do you like, I don't know, I'm not a money person, right? So like, I don't know how I'm trying to say this, but it's like, you start with your values, and how do you make the finances make sure they're aligning with that, you know? And in group practice, I see so many people that get way outside of their values, you know?
Yes,
'Cause
absolutely.
It's not clear. Yeah,
it's not clear. And I think too, like, people just copy their neighbor, and they're like, well, this is what people pay in my area. And it's like, okay, but what you as an employer, what are the work conditions that you want to be creating, right? Or like, or even just like, who are you thinking of employing? Like, is this a place where folks come to get training and mentorship and they're moving through to private practice? Then like, maybe that's going to look a little different, because you're not expecting to have folks who are like raising families, right? And like, or like solely responsible for a huge mortgage, right? But if you're looking to attract people that are more established, who are going to have a lot of financial responsibilities, then, you know, the wage is going to look different. You're going to want to be sure. And like, you know, there's so many variables to play with there, including like the fee that you're charging clients, like caseload numbers. Like, there's so many pieces. And like, I think about group practice and business in general, but group practice definitely is like a machine. There's all these different factors that go into the financial results that your team gets, what their paychecks end up looking like, the money that's left to run the business, and therefore what you can offer in terms of employee like benefits, and what you can create in terms of like a team culture and environment, and the training that's available. All of these things are possible based on how you set up your numbers. And there's a lot of numbers to play with there. So split is just one of the numbers, but I do see that wages is a much clearer way to create a financial agreement with your team.
I think it makes so much sense, because like, one thing I hear a lot from people who are leaving group practice is this idea that like, they had a 70-30 split, let's say, and then they were expected to do marketing. But then in their mind, the marketing they did was for free because it's not part of that 70-30 split.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a great example where something is set up poorly. Right? Like, it's like, if you're emphasizing a split, then you're also emphasizing that this is based on your clinical hours, which does make it seem like that other work is for free, right? There are ways, if you want your team to do marketing, that you could build that in to, like, they get paid differently for marketing, or they understand this much marketing is part of your contract because you get paid a very high hourly rate, whatever, right?
Right. Yeah. And I know for me, like at a group practice that I worked for, I think that was confusing for people for sure.
Yes.
Is like this idea of like, what about your notes? What about your administrative time? How does that all factor in? And one thing I saw a lot of people doing was kind of this like nickel and diming thing. Being like, well, I'm not paying for, I get paid 70% based on my clinical hours. So I'm not going to do any marketing. And I expect X number of referrals per month. And I expect, and it's like, ultimately that wasn't sustainable for the practice.
No.
And I could see like how that wouldn't work,
Yeah. And I think when I hear about a scenario like that, Kelley, first of all, I will say 70-30 is actually a really generous split.
Yeah.
I don't think...
Yeah, it was very generous.
Probably the group practice that you worked for was not particularly financially sustainable. That would be my guess, just hearing those numbers off the top. Because generally speaking, if we think about like profit first numbers, the way that normal kind of baseline profit first numbers work is that 30% of the money coming in goes to operating expenses. Then there's money for like payroll and taxes. And then there needs to be room for profit, and buffers to be built on top of that. So if a clinician is getting paid 70%, and I mean, I hope there's not taxes being added on top of that, because that would make it 75 or 77%. Right. That means that there's only like 23 to 30% to go to the business, which means there's literally nothing to pay the group practice owner for doing all that work. Right. There's no room for buffers. There's no room for like training and supplemental stuff. Like, this is the thing, is like, it can feel, when people have a split, it places so much emphasis on the fact that there's money going to the practice. But as a group practice owner, you need to like create a culture where people feel like they're getting something. There's a reason to be there. They need a reason to be there. Right. And, the way that I have seen, Kelley, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, like my very simple analysis is that if folks are more financially motivated, if they're really paying attention to how much they're making, they're not going to stay in group practice very long. They're not going to work for a group practice very long. Right? Yeah. So it's like, and there are folks, people like us who went into solo practice, we should really just be in solo practice, because we obviously, did the math and decided it's worth the extra work. In group practice, I find the folks who are happiest in group practice are people who really don't want to have their own business. They want to be part of a bigger team. They want to be part of team culture. They want to have training and mentorship and community. So as a group practice owner, you got to make sure you're really offering those things, and those are like really rich to hold the folks who are going to be your long-term employees and are not driven by the biggest paycheck.
Oh, 100%. I could not agree with this more. I, through the years, have talked to so many group practice owners who feel disgruntled that the people they've hired are staying for 2 or 3 years and then moving on. But at the same time, when I say, well, who are you interviewing and what are you attracting? They're talking about people who are really motivated to bring in clients and do their own marketing, and it's like, well, those are the same people that will mature and grow and develop skills to open their own business. So we need to expect that they're going to go. And
absolutely.
That's okay, but that's who you're interviewing.
If that's who you're attracting. And like, I think probably all group practices, it's good to have a mix of folks. But like something that I'm teaching in Money Skills group practice owners is just like, as a business owner, understanding your attrition numbers. How long do folks stay? Do they stay for 2 years? Do they stay for 3 years? And then how long does it take you to replace an employee? And what's kind of the income gap? Because that's just part of business. Like, that's not... And that's what I noticed, like, interviewing. Personal. It's not personal. Interviewing group practice owners. And I've experienced this myself. Like, you lose a team member who, in a group practice, they're an income generator for you. And maybe they were one of your original team members. And maybe you loved them. And maybe you put all this training to them. And maybe you had like maybe they're a friend from an old workplace that you hired. Like, it can be so personal. And many, many, many a group practice owner has burst into tears moments after somebody has given them the bad news as soon as they can. And I've done it before too when I've had employees leave and I'm not even losing money. I'm just like, I love you. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
So it's like, but it shouldn't be a surprise. If you are employing folks, they are going to move through. And like in the book Radical Candor, which full disclosure, I've read 1/3 of the book. But in that first third of the book, she talks about the idea as a manager, you're going to have rock stars and you're going to have shooting stars. Mm-hmm. So like your rock stars are folks who are basically loyal, right? They're people who love being part of a team and love like keeping things running. And those folks, if you take good care of them, giving like the training opportunities kind of within their scope of what they're doing, they're going to stick around for years, right? They don't have like the desire to go do their own thing. Like they want to be part of something bigger. Whereas your shooting stars are people who are passing through on their way somewhere else. And it's really helpful for you to be honest with yourself about what type of employee you have, right? Like if you see somebody and maybe you recognize yourself in them, maybe you like them because they're ambitious and they have ideas and they've got like cool stuff going on. That person is going to leave. Like eventually they're going to do what you did and they're going to start their own thing. Right. And so it's like, I think having reasonable expectations about that in our businesses, that our admin team and our, clinicians who work for us are going to come and go, and planning for that financially and not letting it be personal as much as possible when it happens. Just realizing like, of course they're going to go out and do exactly what I did for myself and my own family and start their own thing, can like take the sting out of it and also just let you show up as the leader you want to be. Right. And like let yourself 100%. Actually be happy for somebody else's growth. Right? Just like you would want somebody to be happy for your growth.
Yes. I mean, I could not stress this enough that I think, I see these almost group practices get set up for failure where they have a really ambitious, wonderful employee who, if they just took a step back, the owner said to themselves, you know what, more than likely I'm going to have this person 3 years tops. So what good can I do for them and what good can I do for my business? And how can we, like almost like a training ship? People are not staying in group practice as long a lot of the time. So, I've seen some really wonderful group practice owners who've done that where they've, and even I'll say my bosses in my group practice said, we know one day you'll probably leave. Like we know that because they did it. They worked in a group practice and then they moved on. Yeah. And we're going to be the most happy for you when you do. And I will say, like, makes me want to cry thinking about it now. Like they were like, so incredibly supportive after 5 years when I left. And it was like my home, it was like a place where I grew up. And, but I had friends who had the exact opposite experience where maybe they were working in a group private practice. And as soon as they told the owner they were leaving, it was like, you're dead to me, And that's really sad.
It's really sad. It's really sad. And I think too, it's like what's happening there? Like, does the group practice owner, do you on some level think you own your employees? Like they're not allowed to make their own choices? Or are you so scarcity driven that you can't be happy for somebody else because you can only focus on your own stories of the negative impact on yourself? Like it certainly is not a group practice owner showing up as their best self when they are creating like a hostile experience for an employee who's just doing exactly what they did.
Hey, therapists. Are you listening to the show and thinking, I really want to launch my own private practice, but I have no idea where to start? Make sure to check out Kelley's Private Practice Roadmap course. In the course, Kelley gives you the exact steps you need to open your own thriving practice. You can find the link below in the show notes.
Okay, so moving on from splits, what do you think, Linzy, what do you see as another kind of mistake that group practice owners make or a pain point?
Yeah, another mistake that I see folks make is this is a very me thing to say, but they don't keep an eye on all their numbers. They're not in touch with their numbers enough. Group practice is complicated. There's a lot of moving parts, right? And like depending on your wages for your employees and then how many sessions they're doing, are they having a bunch of cancellations? Are folks going on vacation? Like there's going to be this variability that's happening in your numbers. And if you're not in touch with your numbers and if you don't understand them, you're not going to be able to foresee things that are foreseeable and can end up in big financial trouble. So I would say most of the group practice owners that I have worked with have had times where they don't pay themselves because when they run payroll, something's got to give. So their own paycheck goes, or where they have to dip into credit cards and loans, like debt to keep things floating. right? And like all of these things are things that if you really understand your numbers, you're going to see what needs to happen, right? Like where tweaks can be made, or like you might identify like, okay, my team, like right now I have minimum sessions of 12 for people or 15, but I'm not holding them to it. But when I don't hold them to it, we actually scrape the bottom of the bank account. So now that I see that, I'm going to have to like step up and lead more clearly in terms of like, you know, we need to be getting up to these numbers. What support do you need? What needs to happen, right? Like you can solve problems when you know what they are. But if you're not actually in touch with your group practice numbers, you have so many problems and you have no idea what they are. And what I see is that, you know, a summer slump comes or whatever, and then people end up like really against the wall. And it's, on one hand, it's like a really unnecessary stress, but on the other hand, it's totally understandable because there are a lot of things to learn when you build a complicated business without meaning to build a complicated business, which is why I say group practice is not easy. It's not the simple solution to your problems. It's like you are building something with a lot of moving parts. So be in touch with those moving parts, understand what they are, take the time to learn them.
Yes. I mean, how often have we all heard the idea of like, I have an overflow of clients, I better hire someone and I better start a group practice. And it makes me want to pull my hair out sometimes because I'm like, wait, if that's the only reason, why not do something different? You have some surplus of clients. That's great. That's telling you, you know, you're putting out something that's really great into the world. Maybe you write a book. Maybe you put out a course. Maybe you, you know, and get speaking events. Maybe like, why an employee? You know, I mean, it can be great, but why, you know?
Well, and it's a funny thing. I don't know why, but it is in the culture even beyond therapists. Like I remember when I was in private practice and I was at that place where I was like, I'm turning people away. Okay, now I've closed my wait list because I actually like don't even know when I'm going to get to these folks on my wait list. I remember like my next door neighbor who's a teacher being like, you should hire somebody. Like it's like, it's just kind of in the water that for therapists, it's like, oh, of course, then you just hire somebody else and you like teach them to work like you do, or you find somebody who works like you do. But and when you do only hire one or two people as well, like often it's not profitable, right? Because what actually makes group practice work is a certain amount of scale, right? So that one or two, especially what folks tend to do, the tendency is you hire somebody who can work part-time, who you used to work with at the hospital, and she's going to see folks after, you know, in the evenings when you're not in your office, and like, isn't that great? But if she's only seeing 6 clients a week, and then there's still the expenses of like adding her to your payroll software, adding her to your simple practice or whatever, and like the extra expenses can make it so that the numbers like don't really work out very well. And sometimes what I even see, Kelley, is like folks who, when we actually look at the numbers, they're not being paid to run their group practice. It's like their numbers work so poorly that they're actually only being paid a normal clinical income that they would be paying in solo practice, but they're working an extra 15 hours a week to run this group like on a volunteer basis.
Yes. I feel like I've seen this more often than I'd like to admit, and in friends and in colleagues where, and I even see it to this other level of them feeling guilty. Like I shouldn't be making money off of running this practice. Like I make my clinical income, and then like to which I say, like, you're assuming all this risk of owning this business, even if that's the only thing that you're doing. Beyond the fact that you're the one probably changing the light bulbs and running the computer systems and managing a staff and doing all the other things, you are assuming the risk, and you will make a profit. You should make a profit. It's a business, you know, but I see people have this guilt factor, you know?
Yes, absolutely. And part of how I think about that, because like I do the term profiting off of other people. I think we can agree it doesn't feel great. I don't love that.
Of course.
I also would not want to be profiting off of other people. But, you know, another way to think about it, if folks are listening and they find themselves in this mindset of like, I don't want to be making money off of others, it's like, what is your group practice owner paycheck? Right. In my course, I talk about it as your like CFO paycheck and your CEO. Like you're the chief financial officer, you're the chief executive officer. How much are you getting paid for that work? If we don't want to think about it as just like extra like yacht money, what is your paycheck? Like how much are you getting paid an hour to like supervise staff and like change the light bulb and like mediate a conflict between two of your clinicians,
do all the payroll,
or talk to somebody's clients who aren't happy with their service, like all of that. Not only is it work that is demanding, but it's also like it's leadership work, right? Like you're having to show up in this very particular way whether you want to or not, right? Like whether you're in the mood. And so how many dollars an hour are you getting paid for that? Is it $20 an hour at the end of the month? Is it 10? Is it 50? Right? And like making sure that whatever that number is like worth it for you. And of course, like in businesses, we go through investment phases. So it might be that you have a plan to grow to 8 clinicians. And so the first couple of years, you're not going to get paid a lot. But you have a vision of where you're going, where eventually you will get paid really well and you'll kind of reap what you sow. But make sure there's a plan. Make sure you're going somewhere that you're going to get paid for all this work. Because lots of folks don't have a plan.
100%. And I would say the majority of folks don't have a plan. The majority of people that I know that are opening private practices do not have a financial plan of how much money they want to be making above and beyond their own practice and how they are going to get there in a logical way.
Yeah. Yes. No. Yeah. I completely agree. I think it's a skill, like, which is, financial forecasting, cash flow projections. That's a skill that we are like not taught. Yeah. And to get to that skill, honestly, first you need to understand your historicals. Like you need to understand how money has flowed, what is realistic. Then you can start to project into the future. And you need like the skill to be able to think through, if this, then what? If I hire a 5th clinician, then what? Oh, now I have to take on another office space. Now my expenses have just gone up a step. Okay, what does that mean for my numbers? Like it is a rich skill set. You know, so I understand why people can't just like, pull it out of the air and figure it out. But it is an essential skill set if you're actually going to build something that is worth the work, basically.
Oh, 100%. And I'll say, even as somebody who teaches people how to open private practices, if I said today, I'm going to open a big group practice, I would need professional consultation on that. I would seek out a ton of professional consultation on that. And like, this is my land. It's like, I would probably just call you. But like, we'd be on WhatsApp all the time.
We would.
And I have no intention of opening a group practice for a variety of reasons. But I think people don't. I don't know why people don't, but people don't seek out help. And I'm like, but you don't. When my friends do it, I'm like, you don't know where you're going. Like, what's the point of all that? Like, yes, you have this friend who needs to get hours and wants to take on or whatever. Sure. But why are you doing it? Like, where are you wanting to go in the next 5 years with your earnings, with your time, how you're spending your time? Do you want more time with your family, less? What do you want? And is good group practice going to get you there? Yeah.
And they're really important questions to ask because I have watched multiple clinicians build large, successful group practices that they hate.
Oh, yeah.
That was not a great use of their time. Yeah. Right? Like, it's like, if you know that you don't really like managing people, if you're more of an introvert and you like to have time to yourself, right? Like, you're not going to like managing a group practice. Like, don't do it. Like you said, like, find other ways to make money, write a book, build a great social media platform, and then start like running courses, right? Speak. Like, there's all these other ways that you can reach more people or bring in more revenue that don't involve having to manage somewhere between 4 and 30 other humans.
Right. Well, and the thing that I love about the work that you do is like, I feel like you break things down and make it possible and concrete. Like, this is probably why I like having you as a friend, because I'm like all out in space, like an ADHD bland floating around all the time. And I feel like you're so good at like being like, okay, here's what the plan is. Let's talk it through. How does it align with your values? Okay, what's step 1? And so I'm envisioning a group practice owner coming to you and coming into your program and feeling like a sense of relief. Like, okay, we are going to figure this out, how to build a business that aligns with my values and makes me money and gets me where I want to go.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I will say, like, I love folks with ADHD, and folks with ADHD love me. In fact, I'm married to one. My dad has ADHD. My brother has ADHD. I'm pretty sure I've never dated a person who doesn't have ADHD, if I look back on my dating history. And my son probably also has ADHD. We're starting to notice. So it's like, but because I love creating order out of chaos, right? Like, that's one of my strengths. And as a therapist, I always felt like that was my approach, is like, take all this stuff that's floating around and like pick out the few salient pieces and like, let's start with creating some order here. Right. Because you can't do all the things at once. Right. And like what I notice with folks in Money Skills for Group Practice Owners is often they'll come to calls and they're like, okay, this thing is like really bothering me and I'm like trying to make this decision and I can feel the like urgency and rush and like I need to decide if I'm converting my like 1099s to W-2s, or like I need to decide if I'm going to make this offer to this person and how much I'm going to offer. And I'm like, if you can just wait till module 3 we're actually going to like really dig into understanding exactly how much an employee costs you and like what that would look like compared to a contractor. And then you're going to be able to make a really grounded offer, and you might make literally the exact same decision, but you're going to be coming from such a grounded, confident place that you're going to know that this is a good financial decision for your business, which is very different than feeling this desperate need to offer somebody a position because they're your like, you know, your dog walker's sister, and you want to like do good by them, and they have to find something right away, and now that's like your problem. Right. And so it is like giving you that foundation means that you can expand and do amazing, creative, beautiful things. Yeah. Because you have solid roots in the ground.
I love it. It makes me feel calmer, and I'm not even in your program. That's probably why we're friends. All right, Linzy. So tell me, if people want to get in touch with you and are interested in money skills for group practice owners, how do they do that?
So you can follow me on Instagram at Money Nuts and Bolts, and then you'll see, like, you'll actually like see when we do open doors, because this is a cohorted program right now. So it's like we're opening it at certain times a year. You can also check out my podcast, Money Skills for Therapists, where you'll also hear about it. And that, I feel like, I really suggest people listen to the podcast if you're interested, because like I want you to get a real sense of my vibe and know like if you want to hang out with me, and you're going to know that if you listen to a couple podcast episodes beyond this one. Yes. And then you'll be in our world, and you will hear about it when we open the doors next for Money Skills for Practice Owners.
I love it. Thank you so much, Linzy. We, again, could talk for a very long time, and we probably will off camera. But thank you so much for being here today. We'll put all the info in the show notes, and we're going to have you back because there's about 18 other topics I want to talk about. So thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you, Kelley.
Ask Kelley Anything is just around the corner. But first, a word from our sponsor. Stay tuned for Kelley's response to your private practice questions.
Therapists, do you want more clients at your full cash rate? Mentaya is a platform that navigates out-of-network benefits for clients. They get clients on average 70% back on therapy by filing claims and chasing down insurance companies. They handle literally everything so that you can focus on what matters. Click the link in the show notes to learn more and get 1 month free using the code PRO.
In today's segment of Ask Kelley Anything, we are going to be talking about waitlist. So let's play today's voicemail.
Hi, Kelley. My name is Sammy, and I'm a therapist in the Seattle, Washington area. And my question today is on therapists having waitlists for their practice. I think it's been said or understood among some therapists that having a waitlist can kind of be a little bit like gatekeeping, a little bit of like keeping clients and not sending out referrals. I understand it also kind of falls into like the scarcity mindset, like making sure you have clients for when your caseload dips. And I also can see how this can be a red flag because it also reduces the opportunity to be able to send those referrals out to other colleagues. So that's not cultivating a therapist network. So I understand that. But I'm also wondering about for those who have a specific niche where clients are reaching out to them for their specific niche, and there aren't a lot of other colleagues that they can refer those people out to. For example, I do specialize in eating disorders, and I have about a wait list of 4 to 5 people. I don't want to have any more than that on my wait list, but the reason why I have them is because I know my other eating disorder colleagues are full and maxed out in their caseloads as well. And so it feels fitting to have them on a wait list, but I also know like when people reach out for help, they probably want it then at that time versus waiting such and such months. So anyway, this feels like a sticky topic. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. How do you handle this in your own practice? We'd love to hear your pros and cons when it comes to wait lists with clients in chiropractic. Thank you so much.
All right, waitlist. This is a tough one, and I will tell you right now, there's not like a set answer. As with most therapy questions, I'm just going to tell you kind of how I do it and maybe give you some thoughts into how I would suggest you do it. You're right, in specific niches, it's going to be hard to find clients. So I'll give you an example. A lot of psychiatrists in my area, especially the ones who take insurance, do keep a wait list simply because there's no one else in my area that is a psychiatrist that takes insurance and that has openings. So the very first thing I might do in your situation is talk to those colleagues that you really trust and refer to. So let's say maybe there are 10 other eating disorder therapists in your area and you guys work similarly and you like them. The very first thing I would do is send an email and say something like, hi, I'm so-and-so. I really respect your work. My practice is currently on a wait list, and I know that many of your practices have wait lists too. So I'm wondering if there's any way we could do some sort of monthly group email check-in where everyone responds to this and says if they have openings. So that's the very first thing I would do, because I think that's a way of cultivating community. Or even if you guys meet quarterly, the other eating disorder therapists in your area, and you guys just review who has openings. Because the reality is, you're right, especially with eating disorder clients, when they need to be seen, they need to be seen. So waiting a few months is not always an option. So the very first thing I would do is have some sort of referral list and some way of keeping track of who has openings. The next thing I would say is, if you are at the point where all of those people are constantly booked, then I would try to think about expanding your circle and maybe meeting some other eating disorder therapists, or going to some eating disorder networking meetings and that sort of thing. If none of that has allowed you to meet other therapists who have openings, then of course you're going to have to keep a wait list. And the way that I usually do that is this. I will tell clients, look, it's my preference not to have a waiting list, and I can't promise you that I am going to have openings in 1 month or 2 months or a year. Because the reality is, you can't really predict your current client's treatment based on your waiting list, right? So I would tell clients I do keep a list and I will call the people on my list when I have an opening, but I can't promise you when that will be. And in the meantime, here are all the other therapists that I recommend that treat eating disorders. And even if you know a lot of colleagues have full schedules, I would still give those lists and those resources. And I would try to include a few other resources that aren't necessarily therapy, maybe some psychoeducational resources. And I would tell the client a few things. I would first let them know, please don't wait around for getting treatment. Because like I said, I don't know when I'll be able to have openings, and I might not have one for up to a year. Second of all, please don't hesitate to call back in 3 months. Things might change. Again, I go down my wait list and I call who has openings, but circle back, because I might not necessarily give you a call right away, or just make sure you're kind of in my ecosystem. I let clients know that piece because I want to remind them that until they actually are my client, you're not in charge of taking care of them, right? And so, yes, you might call them on your waiting list. However, reminding them that they can always give you a call back is a good thing. It's not easy these days with such a shortage of mental health providers. And in an ideal scenario, I actually recommend not keeping a wait list. So if you are in a specialty where there are openings, or where there are other providers in your area that do have openings, I always suggest referring out. I find that clients don't tend to wait around, and they really do need help right in the moment. And what goes around comes around, and referring out is one of the best ways to build your private practice. But if you have no other option, this is how I would do it. So I hope this helps, and I'll see you all next time.
If you would like to be featured on Ask Kelley Anything, I love getting listener questions from you guys. Anything about private practice goes. And the best way to do that is actually just to give me a call and leave me a question on my voicemail. So I'm going to tell you the phone number right now, and make sure to write it down. Here it is. 805-243-8241. I'm looking forward to hearing from you.